Welcome to In the Blue. I am your host, Dr. Cory Frogley, and of course, my trusted partner and co-host, Joseph Stith, has joined me today, and we've got a fantastic show for you. In fact, if you are trying to build the practice of your dreams, we all know it starts with your team. And we're only as good as our better half, as they say. And in this case, when we're talking about work family, there's many that make up our better half, and then some. So this topic today is pretty exciting because we're bringing to you an expert in this field. And Bob Spiel has developed Spiel Consulting, Spiel Associates in Consulting, because he's got several consultants in his group. And Bob comes from an expertise of running hospitals, the CEO of hospitals, which you want to talk about. We say running around with your hair on fire. Hence, poor Bob doesn't have hair anymore. But
careful, Cory. That's my line.
Oh, sorry, I'm stealing all the good stuff already.
Come on, man.
No,
you can't take the bald jokes away from the bald guy.
But when you look at the focus and the ability to juggle many balls in the air all at once, run a hospital. So taking that expertise into the dental field, and Bob will share with us kind of how he stumbled in the dental field 12 years ago as a consultant. But this applies to our chiropractors, our medical doctors, our PTs, our dentists, because it starts with a team. And being able to scale, as that's what we're bringing you, is tools of scalability to a larger multidisciplinary practices, multi-location practices. That's what Bob's going to help us dial in today. And in fact, he's written a book, and I'm going to let Joseph introduce his book before we jump into this topic today.
Whenever I get a chance to pick Bob's brain, it's as long as I can get. And then he goes and writes a book called Flip Your Focus. I'm telling you, this book is like everything that I wish I could have assembled in my consulting career to encapsulate what it takes to really build a winning team. And I just thoroughly enjoyed reading Bob's book, Flip Your Focus, Igniting People, Profits, and Performance Through Upside-Down Leadership. And that's often what we're losing and what we're missing in practice development, isn't it, Bob? Where, including chiropractic, doctors aren't taught leadership skills when they go to school to learn what they do in dentistry or chiro or opto or anything
really
else.
any one of the healthcare professions.
Not exactly.
Yeah.
And yet those industries are changing at breakneck speed, are they not?
Light speed, absolutely.
Including chiro, and we think of the technology that's changing, but the delivery systems are changing. The organizational models for delivering patient care are changing. What are your thoughts on that?
It's all changing, Joseph. We are in throughout all of healthcare, whether it's dentistry, whether it's chiro, doesn't matter. There is an inflection point that's taking place. It was actually Andy Grove from Intel who brought up this idea back in the late 90s. And it was this fascinating concept of, all of us can relate to a bell-shaped curve, And it's just this concept that in industries, you've got these moments of inflection where you reach and crest the top of that curve, but then something's changed and it begins to start to shift downward. And those changes are caused by external forces that you ignore at your peril. Now, the question is, and it kind of goes back to an old phrase that I heard once, that a bad sailor curses the wind, a great sailor sets their sails. Okay, so what do we do in those moments of inflection? And do we continue to ride the same curve, or do we realize that there has been a significant change and the way we've been doing things needs to change? It has to shift, or we're going to ride the curve down to our peril, where the smart business leaders, the smart practice owners will recognize, what got me here isn't going to get me there. So I have to now ride that curve up again and create a new curve. Okay. So you see it everywhere in healthcare in terms of the significant changes that are taking place. And everybody's aware of this with, the PPO structure, with payers, with the government, with all the collateral, shall I say, fallout from the Affordable Care Act. There's just a host of events that have taken place. You throw on top of that technology and the rapid pace of technological change and all the tools and capabilities that are being thrown out that providers can begin to use. And then you throw on top of that the millennial generation. Okay.
Wow.
Which has their own way of looking at life, doing things, and connecting to people. That creates a formula for chaos.
Yes, it certainly does. It may not be complicated, but it's certainly complex.
It is complex.
Multiple layers. And taking a practice that is, high stress, high turnover, and not producing what they should, and converting that into the opposite, high productivity, low stress, low turnover. That doesn't happen overnight. And it doesn't happen just because we maybe want it more than we did yesterday.
No, and to your point, Joseph, it doesn't happen. And I'll tell you this, it won't happen by default. And sadly, people say, well, why don't we teach management and leadership skills in, dental school, in chiro school, in medical school? My reply to that is, we could do it, but until you have the context of having been out, you really wouldn't capture the lessons anyway. But once you're in it, though, you suddenly realize, oh, wow.
And some professionals seem to wake up faster than others.
They do, absolutely.
After I've been doing it for about 15 years, I realized that I really didn't want to work with anyone that hadn't been out of school and practicing for at least 5 or 7 years.
They haven't quite been humbled yet.
And they didn't know what they didn't know, and they didn't know what they needed. So it was very difficult to help them go down a road where they had no appreciation for what that looked like.
No appreciation, no buy-in, no ownership. In fact, that's one of my litmus tests, frankly, with clients is humility and have they been out at least 5 years.
I didn't know that.
I just know by experience if they haven't, it's not going to work out well. But if they have and they've acquired, once they've been beat up enough to realize, whoa, man, there's some other answers out there. That's when they can start to experience great change.
And Cory and I remember it wasn't that long ago where doctors and marketing were at opposites of the spectrum. Remember?
They wouldn't even get in the same room.
That's right. And Cory's a great example of completely embracing that and mastering that technology and understanding what it takes to converse through technology to attract a patient base. He has one of the greatest track records I've ever seen in a doctor.
But that comes back to being humbled in the first beginning of the practice years. I mean, my brother and I opened up a multidisciplinary practice that was 6,000 square feet, high overhead because of some of the equipment that we brought in, and finding ourselves still in those days. That was Yellow Pages. That was your majority of ad spend, but having to learn and humble ourselves to go find new ways to bring in, patient base and attract that. And that led us to some consultants, very much like what you guys are explaining. So
well, and Cory, one of my favorite phrases actually is a Chinese phrase. When the student is ready, the teacher appears.
That's right. That's a good one.
That is true.
Yeah.
Which again, everybody, if you're listening, stay tuned because I'm going to share a very pertinent story to that phrase at the end of this.
Great. So there's this tremendous amount of change taking place, as we know inside healthcare. The question is, are we going to embrace it or fight it? I remember years ago hearing Tom Peters say, "It's all white water from here on out in business." Okay, but also this really kind of poignant phrase that in calm seas, all ships show equal mastery. It's in the storms that you really show what type of sailor you are. And my belief is that it's really leadership and team building that allows a practice to ride up to that next level and achieve both the economies of scale, the level of service that is needed in today's environment, but also takes the doctor out of the chief everything officer mode to become the chief empowerment officer. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't happen by accident.
That takes advanced leadership skills. It really does.
It does, yes.
And that isn't something that you learn in a classroom. It's not didactic in delivery like you can learn a procedure. It is something that you learn on the job, in the mix, in the actual demand itself, isn't it?
You do. And I have doctors who will frankly just look at me with this deer in the headlight look of, I learned all these skills and they're all cognitive.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden you're telling me I've got to deal with the emotional skills?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
But it's Cory, our good friend Larry Winterstein, I remember this phrase, and it's true across all of healthcare, but I'll say in particular with chiro and dentistry. Dentistry is first a behavioral art, and then it's a clinical science. Mm. And what leads to that 5-year mark of finally feeling beat up enough and poor enough and humble enough is you suddenly realize, wow, what they taught me in school, that's the easy part.
Right.
It's all this people stuff
that
I now have to deal with and I feel totally unprepared for. But it's the people stuff that takes you up to that next level.
Mm-hmm.
And
because
beyond.
a practice is essentially not competing with their peers or not competing with the practice next door or down the street. They're actually competing with themselves, right? With the way they used to be.
That's exactly right. They compete with themselves. And whoever they were yesterday, who they're competing against is that. Mm-hmm. And the question is, who do they want to be tomorrow? And, I love to be able to get that idea out and practice leaders' minds and practice team members' minds, simply because it suddenly changes the dynamic. You're not focused and worried about all these other things happening out in the stream. Think about what's happening here. What can you do to become better?
So Bob, how do you compare then, Bob? If that's the metric, how do you compare today and where they are today with where they were yesterday or where they want to go into the future? How do you manage that? How do you illustrate those expectations?
Great question, Joseph. I mean, obviously you can measure services based on production. Okay. And I believe that having KPIs is really an important factor because you've got certain success measurements like, BlueIQ is a pioneer in terms of how do you make it digestible and actionable so that the team can actually get their heads wrapped around it and do something with it. Because one thing that's come to me very clearly in my consulting career is ideas don't create change, ownership does.
Whoa. Say that again.
Ideas don't create change, ownership does.
Ownership does.
Yeah. So how do we get the team and the owners, the quote unquote owners of a practice, to own their performance, to own the relationships, to own the data, and then internalize it and see what it's telling them about how they're doing? I mean, numbers don't tell everything, but they do tell you something.
And they begin to tell that story, right?
They begin to tell that story. Absolutely. But there are other numbers as well in terms of Google reviews and patient service surveys and team reviews and Team 360 reviews. And, there's a whole host of ways that you can look at it, but really it boils down to just a really simple model of an owner realizing, number one, if you want an A team, you can't be a B leader. It's impossible. Okay. Because you can never run faster than your leader. And so my book in particular is really designed to help burgeoning leaders, the leaders that are at that breaking point, thinking about, how did a nice girl or guy like me get in a place like this? and realize there's a path out.
I think
Okay.
we've all asked ourselves that question
We've
at one
all
point
asked
in
that
life.
question. Yeah.
If you're honest with yourself.
Yeah. And how do I get my life back?
I love that
You know?
concept because there are no shortage of ideas. There's no shortage of good ideas.
That's
but
correct.
but that's not the path to change. The path to change is ownership, owning it, stepping up to it, and empowering others to step into that so that change can happen.
Yes.
That still sounds, it's fairly idealistic, and it's fairly logical. But how do you take do that? How do you do that? I mean, how do you take, for instance, what about a practice who thinks they're an A player team, but they are a B? How do you change that perception?
That's where coaches can come in particular. I know, Cory, you've used coaches. Joseph, you've been a dental coach, simply because they can bring in that outside perspective. Because one thing that we know about practice is they become islands.
Mm-hmm. They become isolated. Yes.
They really do. And without that outside information coming in to say, well, wait a minute, there's another way.
Mm-hmm.
I've actually seen it work.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there's a lot of value in that. I appreciate that there's so much learning online now today.
Yeah.
And so much it's available, just like this type of broadcast. But data and information are meaningless unless you can look at them in the context of where am I now and where do I want to go next? And therefore what? Okay. Therefore, what am I going to do about it? So how do you take a B team and turn them into an A team? They need feedback to begin with, both feedback from the outside, but also feedback from the inside. And then they need to create a culture of participation so you have joint ownership of the goals and where things are progressing. And then the knowledge and the skills and the training to realize, wait, in this healthcare model, if we really work on systems, if we really work on communication, that's actually going to help with our service, which then is going to boost our production, which then is going to allow us to do all these other cool things that we've never been able to do because we're so poor. We've got a doctor who comes in and says, where's the money? Instead of a doctor who's feeling like, man, the best thing that I've ever done is empower my team, make them my hands, and realize I can't do it all myself. But if I create co-owners with them and through them, then collectively, with the right coaching from the outside, practices start to soar in today's environment. And the coolest thing is the chaos starts to dissipate. And all of a sudden, they play what my good friend Catherine Eitel calls the hidden game.
The hidden game.
The hidden game, which is the game that the other practices don't even understand is out there. Because they're too busy dealing with survival to understand that there's another game that you play once you hit the point of significance.
Wow, that's deep. It makes sense as to why a doctor wants to know so much about, or seems to be interested in about how his colleagues are doing. Because they're wanting perspective, aren't they? They're wanting to compare their performance to something else to see whether they're winning or they're losing. Now, the concept of using your own practice to make those determinations and to drive that ownership to every member of the team is a relatively new concept when you think of it. That's a leadership skill that has to be taught, right?
Yeah, it does. It has to be taught, but it's also a paradigm, to borrow Stephen Covey's phrase. And why I titled my book "Flip Your Focus." It's a really simple paradigm that I have seen every effective leader adopt, and it's this idea that my job is to see that my team succeeds. And if a leader will adopt that mentality and then take on personal responsibility for 3 fundamental behaviors, and one is to really clarify the roles and goals, and make sure this sense of ownership is very clear and everybody knows what, why, and how, Then they create a true sense of ownership across the team. And then on the backside, use appreciation. All right. People work for a lot of reasons, but from my perspective, the biggest reason is a pat on the back, a thank you, and once in a while, a surprise bonus. And if you'll just adopt those simple mentalities right there, you'll be ahead of so many of your other classmates and colleagues out there that are still worried about, I got to control it all.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's learning the art of how you release control, but still don't lose control.
You mentioned in your book, 1 mindset, but 3 behaviors. Tell us more about that. Tell us more about what you mean by the 3 behaviors, but 1 mindset.
Well, the mindset is this idea that my job is to work myself out of a job. What that really means for a leader is I'm here to see that my team succeeds. Instead of them being here to see that I succeed, you flip that.
Oh, the flipping of the focus.
That's the flipping of the focus, you see. All right. And then the 3 behaviors associated with that are the 3 fundamental things that I've seen with practice leaders that start to become A, understandable, B, manageable, and C, doable. And I'll just go in reverse order. Number 1, as I mentioned, showing appreciation.
Okay.
You'd be amazed how difficult at first it can be for practice owners to actually start to say thanks. Hey, that was great. Because as a scientist, and Cory, you can probably relate to this, you've been trained so much in finding what's wrong and trying to perfect what's wrong.
I just had that conversation with a team member yesterday.
Yeah. But guess what happens if all we do is focus on what's wrong?
We squash.
Yeah, we do.
Squash morale.
And the team members start to be super demotivated because all of a sudden they're like walking around like, gee, I don't want to get in trouble. You know, I'm just going to do enough, but I'm sure not going to stick my neck out because, oh my goodness, I might get slapped. Instead, to learn, you know what, focus on what's right. I've got a client that I had this challenge with. He's an oral surgeon, and he had a real kind of, I'd have to say, issue with his team, feeling like they could never do enough, that he wasn't happy with their performance. And a month and a half ago, I just said, listen, doctor, I just want to give you one assignment alone. Just tomorrow, catch them doing something what's right and acknowledge it. That's it. Don't worry about anything else. And the cool thing was, in a month, literally, you guys, in a month, his whole practice is starting to turn around. His people are smiling. His performance is improving. His culture is now hopeful. And he's actually got team members that are relaxing and starting to take chances and risks. Okay, so that's if there's one thing the folks that are listening today would like to change and improve their leadership Monday morning, just catch people doing things that are right.
There's the actionable right there.
Yeah, and it's not as hard as it sounds. Then number 2, create a culture of participation. Okay. What I mean by that is, instead of feeling like it's all up to you, realize that your job is to make your team your hands. Okay. And that's the beauty of the business models that we're in, is that once you catch that vision, the leverage you can create throughout your entire organization of empowering very skilled individuals to become your hands allows you to make money and deliver service when you're not in the room. And to continue to raise the bar in a way, again, this hidden game, so that the other guys don't even get what's going on, because you're playing at an entirely different level. Okay? I mean, the ultimate goal for me in working with practices is to kind of establish this mentality that, you know what, it isn't just my job to do my job at work. It's my job to see that everybody else around me succeeds.
That's a different mindset.
It's a completely different mindset. Yeah. So you see that flipped focus isn't just the leader with a capital L.
Yeah.
It's the entire team.
Excellent.
Okay. And again, it's simple in idea, a little bit harder in practice, but if you just go in Monday morning with this thought of, wait a minute, I'm going to look around and see how can I make the people around me better? It actually changes the whole chemistry of the organization. And it doesn't have to be the oldest person who's been there. It can be the newest hire.
Yeah.
That can start that, like dropping a pebble in a pond. It can start that ripple effect. And then people all of a sudden start to feel like, wow, I'm playing at a whole different level than I have before.
One mindset, three behaviors. And those behaviors are things that we do in our families. We do those in relationships. We often forget to do those when we walk into work because we think that's a different place, right? With a license to act different maybe than we would anywhere else. When in fact, people are people.
People are people.
Where do they find your book?
On Amazon.
Perfect.
Yep, Amazon.com. It's both on the print version and on Kindle. Flip Your Focus. And it's meant for both business owners who were at that point of, I want my life back, and team members who are saying, you know what, there's got to be another way. And maybe I can't run this practice, but I can sure lead in my respective area.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, Bob, can't thank you enough for being on our show today. And in closing, I just want to share a quick story because Bob actually had a dramatic impact on my life. We found ourselves at a point where our first product, Backbone Pro, was being used. We introduced it into the chiropractic industry, some of the integrated medical spaces, and then we started finding some referrals into the dental space, and we started having some dentists use it, which led us to meeting some pretty amazing influencers, Larry Winterstein being one of them, Linda Miles being another one. And interestingly enough, both Linda and Larry sent us to Bob Spiel. And
that says something.
Yeah, it was a little meant to be. In fact, Bob was so gracious that he offered for me to drive up and spend some time with him, and I didn't know what to expect.
I did about half a day together, didn't we?
We did. We went to lunch together. We sat down, and Bob really. My question was, with this product and with this type of foundational principles that we're trying to deliver to an industry, we've got some opportunity. We had opportunity in the real estate market. We had opportunity in the auto sales market.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, they were pulling us, and it gets kind of scary because sometimes a lot of opportunity, you get scattered, and we knew that focus was going to be pretty important in getting this embryo of a product really out into the industry. And so Bob took a half a day to take us through an exercise that I think every single listener on this show needs to go through with Bob, because Bob was able to go through with us and not tell us where our focus needed to be. He simply walked through each industry with specific questions and specific mentoring skills that allowed us to see clearly where the opportunity and where we were supposed to be, which led us to dental and to stay in Cairo and expand into dental. Excuse me.
Bless you.
And I walked away from that day, and I had about a 4-hour drive home, and I was speechless, Bob. It was impactful. It put me on a path that has really led to today, which is pretty fun to be able to circle back and have you on the show.
It's pretty cool. Thank you.
So thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Well, it was a privilege to be able to help you discover and then own your solutions.
Yeah.
And that was awesome, Cory, and I'm proud of you for everything that you've done. and now that you brought Joseph on board, and this is just the beginning of greater and greater things, I know, because with the two of you and then your whole team associated with you, you are flipped, focused leaders. And this is going to be a great success and a great boon to the industry and your clients, just because I'll put it this way, because I know the hearts of both of you. And ultimately, that's really what this is all about, is, leading from the heart, empowering hearts, and then allowing hearts to take off in a way that is both remarkable and wonderful. So thanks.
Beyond the compliments for which we're grateful. This is why I love to spend time with Bob. I love picking his brain. Now, don't you have an offer, Bob?
I do, Joseph. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. I've got an offer, and this is my props to you for first being involved in this, listening to this presentation today or recording. But the first 6 practices that would reach out to me, I'd be happy to provide a 30-minute consult. And It's just sitting down and having a virtual, cup of coffee. All right. I don't drink coffee, but it's just a virtual chance to sit down and really just ask 2 very salient questions that I found to be or just eye openers for practice owners in terms of where they are now and where they want to go.
And I can attest, they cannot have 30 minutes with you and not walk away having learned something that will impact their life.
Well,
thank you.
Thank you.
I can be a witness of that for sure. You guys, thank you for joining our show today. Bob, thank you. We are here every Friday, 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 Eastern. We are all about change, tools of scale, helping you get where you want to be. And oftentimes we need a mentor in our life to help us get there. Thank you for joining our show today. Again, Bob, thank you, and have a wonderful weekend.